Another episode of the Next Fix podcast, where we are continuing to dive into comeback stories. And here we have a true professional, a veteran, a real advocate for people who are making a comeback in their lives after committing to service for the country, things like that. But he's also got a comeback story of his own. I'd like to welcome Tom to the show. Tom, thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. And so we're going to dive right in. I want to know, and we always typically like to know around here, right? We want to know, like, when did the shit hit the fan for you, man? When were you looking around and thinking to yourself, like, it's decision time?
That's interesting you say that. There's been a few moments, I'd say. For me, I'd say the earliest one happened when I was a teenager. So, like probably a lot of folks in your audience, people who know, is that, my father struggled with depression, mental health issues, all sorts of, bipolar issues, was in and out of recovery. I mean, I grew up going to AA meetings with my dad, right? He was in treatment, out of treatment. My parents were divorced. It was a rocky relationship at best, I guess you could say. But he still really loved me. I still loved him, but it was a struggle, man. Just like, and that's not a unique story, right? But so 5 days before I finished high school and 3 weeks before I left for the Marine Corps, my dad died of a meth overdose. So he had relapsed. We didn't know that. We didn't know that he had relapsed, and he died. And then, so what happened was that was a decision point. Yeah.
Let me pump the brakes there, brother, because,
Sure.
Like meth in itself, right, to overdose, I'm imagining like his heart just basically exploded. I mean, is that kind of like?
Pretty much.
Right, okay.
But he was actually in a coma for about 10 days before he actually died. Yeah, so this is the mid late 90s, right? When he died was 1999. So this is, before the opioid crisis was really what we look at it today. Back then, and my dad had a ranch out in the California desert. Think Breaking Bad. That there's not a lot to do out there. That was very much the drug of choice, and still is in certain parts of the country. And his was mostly alcohol, but obviously you he had this big ranch out there, property, and everyone out there's just doing meth. And what's interesting is he got away from. We knew that he made a couple of it. All of a sudden, things started to click. Like, that's why he took off. So he would take off on these big international trips. And what we didn't know is that a lot of times when people are in trouble, they just like physically remove themselves from the situation, try to get away from it. So what he actually did is and we thought it was this, oh, wow, Dad's doing a great thing. And it wasn't a good thing. This is right. You might remember in 1999, there was that all these wars in the Balkans, particularly in Kosovo. He went and became an aid worker, just signed up, volunteered with like the International Catholic Relief Commission, and joined and became a volunteer. So he was at a refugee camp on the Kosovar-Macedonian border right there, helping people out. My dad had some success in business, so he was actually pretty good at leadership management. But, when he was first just passing out socks and water bottles and whatnot, and then all of a sudden they realized, wait, this guy knows a couple things. They kind of put him in charge of just managing shipments and everything going in. So he went and spent a couple months out there. And then, he came back. And as soon as he came back, apparently like within hours, he used again. And then he managed to drive himself to the hospital in Barstow, collapsed in the ER, and 10 days later he was dead. Yeah. So
that's such a struggle, brother. And you mentioning that you're like at AA meetings, like how old were you when you had those AA meetings? Like, I mean,
10. I can remember, like I'd tag along with him, I just kind of hang out in the back or whatever. I never went to Al-Anon for some reason. I thought that was interesting. My dad never had me go to Al-Anon, but I was like going to meetings, and it was interesting because my dad was in Los Angeles for a while, and he had a lot of friends in the entertainment industry. So like we were actually at like AA meetings with like A-list celebrities, which is really weird.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, well, openly, he talks about it all the time, but my dad was in a small men's group with Mel Gibson. And they're buddies. Okay. They were like pals. I got a picture of my dad and Mel. It was weird. Yeah, it was weird. In the 90s, and a bunch of other like Hollywood producers. So folks in the entertainment world, and which me as a kid, I was like, oh crap, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. You're like
I was like,
too hard.
Yeah, exactly right. Like my dad's friends with Mel Gibson. Like he invited us over to the Warner Brothers lot, and I got to play in his office. So I was like 11 years old, and I was yeah.
That like so with your dad and kind of what this image or this circumstance is incredibly common because He's
Yeah.
checking off major boxes.
Yeah.
He did all right with business. He was doing some good things, out of the kindness of his heart, donating his time around the world. And it's like, that's such a gift and a curse, especially for people that have addiction
Yeah.
problem, because they think if I could check off enough boxes, then it's okay that I do this to my body and my soul on the other end.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay if I do the meth because I did all this really cool and great stuff for a lot of people. Or, that's very peculiar. But now you lost your father, massive,
Right.
and that's early. But then as a result of losing him, and that's when you made the decision to go into the service?
It wasn't that. Well, I already knew I was going in. Right.
Okay.
I already decided. I knew ahead of time. I signed up. I signed the paperwork the summer after my junior year of high school, but I didn't ship until the following summer. So I already knew in high school I was going to be going to the Marine Corps, and so I mean it was already on it was already on the books. I was already going, but I was imagining like my dad would see me at Marine Corps graduation and go to my high school graduation, and we'd see all this and everything. And obviously, that didn't happen. So then for me, so that was like a big huge pivotal moment in my life where all of a sudden my ass got kicked into adulthood, right? Like I was no longer a kid anymore. My dad was gone, died under like less than great circumstances, put it mildly. And just a few weeks later, I'm in the Marines. I'm going through Marine Corps boot camp. And it was just, I got straightened out in so many ways. I was a pretty good kid. I mean, I didn't get into trouble. I didn't drink. My grades weren't great, but I was fat and out of shape. I had lousy grades. I was just kind of a layabout in a lot of ways. I was good at some things, but not in others. And so first off, that got my mind right physically, right? Because, the Marines are the best fat camp ever, right? I mean, I lost 60 pounds in boot camp. I couldn't run at the time when I showed up. I couldn't run, couldn't do any pull-ups or anything like that. And, my mother walked right past me. She didn't even recognize me when I finished the Marines. Yeah, didn't even recognize me. I was, in my uniform and all that. And I was super skinny then. And she was absolutely amazed. And it was just what it did, though, is it just changed so much about me, how I looked at the world, my own personal self-discipline, that I still, to this day, carry with me.
Well, Tom, I want to know, I want to know just out of curiosity, do you feel like maybe if you didn't end up in the Marines, do you maybe think you could have ended up like your father?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, I really think that's entirely possible, even likely. And so, for example, my grades weren't good enough to get in any decent colleges or anything like that. I didn't really have any plans. All I wanted to do was be in the military. And so that was kind of how I grew up. I was just like, my dad wasn't a veteran. My stepfather, who raised me for a good chunk of my life, was. He fought in Vietnam and all that. But to me, it was just what I loved about the military was like this structure, this camaraderie, this sense of belonging, purpose, right? All of that. Like that was, to me, that was just everything I wanted in life. And the Marine Corps did it, right? And so then I found my way. So I worked really hard. I was a good junior enlisted Marine. And then one of the things, my biggest dreams forever growing up was actually to go to the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And it's not easy to get there from when you're enlisted in the Marines to go to a service academy, but I got it. And I got in there not on my academic chops. Like they sent me to a prep school for a year to which they hammer into you math and chemistry and physics and all that. Because it's a very technical school, right? It's an engineering school. And so, but I got into there and see, that's what happened. That was really interesting is I was a bit of a bad boy at Naval Academy, which how I know, I had to have gone to a military school like the Naval Academy because I'm pretty confident if I went to any big university, university, I grew up in Seattle, right? I went to University of Washington or USC, UCLA or something like that, or, name any big campus. I most likely would have drank, smoked, and snorted my way out of there. I'm pretty confident I would have. And so the thing is the Naval Academy has some serious guardrails on your behavior there, right? However, I pushed those. Now, I never messed around with drugs or anything like that, but I drank a lot of beer, and I had a lot of fun. It was, whenever they did let us out, it was drinking, it was girls, it was partying, all that standard stuff. So I very much treated a military school like it was a civilian school in a lot of ways, like a normal college. And actually, I got in a lot of trouble, but not like bad trouble. It was just like you missed class, you were out drinking when you weren't supposed to be, stuff like that, right? So a lot of that. I barely graduated from the Naval Academy, but I did. But I mean, along the way, I mean, I had to go stand before a 3-star admiral, the superintendent of the Naval Academy, and explain to him why he should let me graduate.
Okay. Yeah.
Twice on 2 separate occasions. So I'm very grateful to Vice Admiral Rodney Rept. He was the guy, and I saw him years later. I'm like, thanks. I was like, you're a good son, and it was fine. But at the time, it was pretty scary. But I was
So what you mentioned, Tom, like guardrails, man, it's so important, and it's such a real blessing that like you probably kind of knew it at the time, but everybody needs a different set of like guardrails or support, right? Like we say support, it's a very generic term. I like the analogy of guardrails because it implies that we're moving forward.
Yes.
Right. If you're moving down the road and you're moving down, hell, even a bowling alley, you put up the guardrails and like you kind of bump into them.
Yeah.
But you're kind of still in the right direction.
That's absolutely correct. We're always moving forward towards something. Like you're always progressing towards something. And there's a lot of clear paths. Unlike when I got out years later, went to the private sector, it's like, it actually, I can see for a lot of veterans how it can get really scary when everything's taken care of for you. Yeah, you've got a tough job. You do, right? Lots of times the line of work I was in was not easy. And it was hard to get into, hard to finish, right? So when I finished my first job, drove ships for a few years, which was great. I enjoyed it, right? But I wanted to do something more challenging, more difficult. So I applied, worked really hard, and I applied and got into what's called explosive ordnance disposal, which is the bomb squad for the Navy, right? And so it's also the special operations bomb squad. So, I mean, that means very difficult training, incredibly physically demanding. It's a lot of folks, when I talk about it, they're like, oh, so you're like a SEAL? And the thing is, though, is that we actually, Navy SEALs and Navy EOD have the same origins from the underwater demolition team, the UDT, in World War II, for any of the history buffs out there, the military buffs out there. But then in the 60s, part of them branched off from UDT and created what's called the Sea, Air, Land teams and SEAL teams. But EOD is still there and always has been. So in terms of the training, we don't go through the same training. We have to do the same skills. So like dive, jumping out of planes, good with weapons, and we integrate all the time. I deployed with Army Special Forces. We worked with Navy SEALs all the time, very closely. Matter of fact, whenever you see the news and you see like a bunch of like SEALs or Special Forces guys doing stuff, there's actually about 2 or 3 EOD guys in there. You just don't, you can always spot us because we have more tools on our kit usually. But the thing is like the biggest difference between me and a Navy SEAL is that I don't have any book deals. I don't have a podcast. I'm not a Fox News contributor, and I'm not running for Congress. Those are the main differences. So the biggest ones, right? And so I was actually with one of my SEAL buddies yesterday, and I just throw that at him all the time. But so I went into that line of work, and so again, but you've got these guardrails. You have very high standards that you have to live up to, physically, all of that stuff, physically, mentally. Like it's a demanding job, but you have everything taken care of for you, right?
Right. Yeah.
You get a regular paycheck, right? It's the most dependable paycheck there is, because if you don't get paid, we've all got a lot of problems, right? And so, you've got your health insurance taken care of, your housing's taken care of, your family's taken care of, right? So, and you have a set career path. You go here and go here. Maybe you could break off and go this way or go that way, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
So then when I did, I had a great time in the military. I loved it. I went all over. I went to more countries than I could count. I did some really unique and interesting things, not your typical, 12 months in Iraq or 12 months in Afghanistan. I was mostly in the Pacific. I was in like Japan, Philippines, India, Nepal, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore, like doing really cool, interesting things, not your typical kinetic military thing. But when I decided like I wasn't having fun anymore because I was an officer, and as an officer, once you get to a certain point in seniority, it's all desk work after there. It's like you're not jumping out of planes. You're not, as we would say, you're not doing hood rat shit with your friends, right? Like you're not doing that anymore. And it's all PowerPoints, spreadsheets, emails, etc.
I love hood rat shit, man.
I know, right? Oh, we were.
I have this inside of me. There's an inside psyche that loves hood rat shit. I crave alleyway commerce. And so I have to my motivation for it in my older age, like I'm not as like eager to get into it, and I know better than what happens if I do get into it. But hood rat shit is something that motivates me many times, and it probably shouldn't. But you're recognizing this, that you need something, you need an edge.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, I did. And I mean, it was like the great team, like my team and I, it was like me, and it's like I'm trying to like me and like 5 of my friends, my team, I was in charge of it, but it's like you're all boys. And it's like we had 2 giant containers full of scuba tanks, wetsuits, parachutes, guns, robots, explosives, ammo, and we just flew all over Asia doing training, blowing stuff up, doing cool shit. Loved it, absolutely loved it. But then again, I'm no longer, once I get to a certain point, I'm no longer on a team with the boys. Then it's like a little more boring. So I ended up in Washington, D.C., and they're going to send me on a gig where I'd go to Thailand for about a year, and then I'd go back to Singapore. I'd spent a lot of time in Singapore. I was going to go back there, and then that job got turned off, right? It just, for whatever reason, we're not doing that. You're not going to go there anymore. We're going to stick you at the Pentagon for a couple of years. We'll see what happens, right? And I'm like, no, I'm done with that. So I got out and I went to the private sector. Now, the only thing that told me I could go into the private sector, because I was one of these guys where I wanted to be a career military officer. It's all I wanted. But then when I was in a couple of years before I got out, I was in San Diego. I was in Coronado on a Commodore's staff, like an admiral's staff. And I had some time, and the Navy made a terrible mistake, and they let me go to business school. So I went to B school. The Navy paid for it. Thanks for paying your taxes, everyone. And I went to UCLA for an MBA program. Really enjoyed it. It was good. I still got issues about MBAs. I would say that, like, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, MBA is not the right way to go. I would say it's nice to have the prestige. You get a fancy piece of paper, right? And, you got that network, blah, blah, blah. But what it did teach me is I started looking around this classroom, and I'm like, look, I'm not the smartest guy in here. I'm at least as smart as that guy over there. And that guy has way more impact on the world. He's got way more control over his life. He's making like triple what I'm making, at least. And it's like he seemed to be having a whole lot more fun. And I'm like, okay, then I was intrigued. So then fast forward a couple years later, I'm in DC. The job, in overseas gets turned off. And then I'm going to be at Pentagon. And I'm like, I'm going to go out and do my own thing. So I got out. Got an initial job to pay the bills, right? Working for a defense contractor, selling combat diving equipment to like my friends, essentially, like sales guy selling combat dive equipment to the SEALs and special forces. It was great. I mean, they sent me to Israel as an Israeli defense contractor. They sent me to Israel, sent me to Norway. I'd go diving in a fjord with the Norwegian commandos. It was pretty cool, right? And so, but the thing is, I knew that like this wasn't it for me, and I was taking that time to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Right. And so I wanted to start something. I knew I wanted to start my own company. I wanted to do something that I think would be meaningful. And so then what always stuck with me 17 years prior was my dad. Right. Yeah. And so all those folks who struggled with recovery and all that. And on top of that, I knew so many guys that off themselves or were in an alcoholic or drug addicted spiral, were pretty much on their way out the door. I mean, frankly, I hate to say it, I can tell there's circling the drain, right? And they're going to die soon, either through suicide or through addiction. And I said, okay, this is something. So then I started putting together a plan. I put together a board of directors. I brought on one of my classmates from the Naval Academy who is like smarter than I am. He was a Navy nuclear submarine officer. So he was like worked in nuclear power. So it means he's really good with the numbers and the spreadsheets. He's hyper organized. Also, he's very different. He's kind of the yang to my yin. He's total Boy Scout, right? Like I was a Boy Scout too, but he was like really a Boy Scout.
Right. He's the eagle.
Right. And he was like very, very straight and narrow, straight laced guy, and he's probably one of the most principled human beings I've ever known. And so we got together. We started a company. So what we did, we wanted to start through acquisition. So we wanted to start doing addiction treatment, mental health treatment, and we wanted to get in the veteran space, but we knew starting off, you kind of have to start like the general public, right? And so we did. And so we acquired a company called Miramar. We used one thing I gotta say for those who are looking to acquire a business, I would also say that, if you're trying to buy or create an operating company, I would say it can be much easier and better to acquire a company and make it your own, as opposed to trying to start something from scratch. So in other words, buying a revenue stream versus trying to create a revenue stream, right? Especially since we weren't subject matter experts. We had a team of folks that were. But so that's what we did. So we used the SBA 7A loan program, which is super underrated. A lot of folks out there, if you're looking to acquire a business or looking for a proper business loan, they'll loan you up to $5 million, 10-year amortization. It's 10-year money. It's minimal interest, and you don't have to have a ton of collateral. And as long as you've got like a halfway decent credit score, you could probably get it. And so we used that program, identified Colin, my partner, identified a couple of small equity investors, got a little bit of equity investment in there, bought Miramar, and from there, and then that was a struggle. It was a real struggle. But then we started immediately, within a matter of months, we started pursuing, or weeks really, pursuing the contract to treat veterans through the VA. And we didn't get that for another year, but that's what we did.
So Tom, the Miramar, is it a treatment center?
Yeah, it's a treatment center. We started small, gotten bigger, moved around, but today we've got 6 locations here in Southern California.
Wow. Oh, dude, yeah.
And we have through us or our other affiliates, we've got everything from detox, residential, PHP, IOP, OP, the full spectrum.
Right.
But we primarily Miramar primarily does detox and residential for veterans through the VA. And for those who may or may not be familiar with it, is like, in a lot of ways, we're kind of like the trauma center from a behavioral health standpoint, mental health or addiction. We're kind of like a trauma center in the sense of we are here to keep you alive, keep you sober, get you stabilized, get some real treatment. And then from there, whether or not you stay with us through outpatient, PHP or IOP, or we work through the VA, then we get you back on your feet. And we work with you even afterwards, even after you've discharged, keep in touch with you, make sure you've got resources. Do you have a job? We keep in touch with you from there. So unlike a lot of veteran nonprofits, which do great work, but I'm just saying we're a little different in the fact that a lot of them focus on wellness. They usually grab guys before things have gotten really bad and try to make them really strong and healthy and vibrant, which is excellent. We usually work with a lot of those companies after they've been with us, because we're here to in our mind, it's like, hey, success looks like you are alive. You're not incarcerated.
Right. Yeah.
And you're sober, you're stable, and then we'll help you make sure you've got a job. And then after you get a job, it's like you can pay the rent. If you can pay the rent, then maybe we can start having some relationships. And we've had guys who are from on every end of the spectrum and everything in between, in terms of really, really folks who have been, frankly, I hate to say this, but just kind of performing rather poorly their entire lives. Just have been, and just to be able, for them, sometimes what does success look like for them? Where it's like they've got a job or some form of income, they're able to pay the rent, maybe reestablish relationships with their families, have some friendships, maybe a relationship. That's success, right? Yeah. And frankly, for a lot of people, that is success, because the alternative is, quite frankly, is death or incarceration for a lot of these people. And
you touch on something there that, my experience in the space has been there's so many points on a spectrum. I mean, that's what it is. So there's an infinite amount of points on this spectrum, especially in recovery. And so for you to clarify and differentiate the fact that you're dealing with people that are circling the drain, they're about to, any day could be the last.
Yes.
That's an entirely different kind of person than somebody myself, right? When I speak to somebody and they've gotten maybe, a few months, and then they'll relapse, and then they got a few months and they'll kind of crumble. And so they're kind of limping along, but they've gotten a little bit of success. So, and then there's people all in between, always, and so it's so important to differentiate that, because sometimes people reach out to me and they're going down the drain. And I'm like, man, I don't know how I can help you. I'm at dinner with my kid. I'm just not that facility. I'm not that place. Right. And it's not that I don't want to help them. It's I'm not equipped to help them. And so what you're saying is that you are that place.
That's what we are. I mean, a lot of times when they come to us, they're coming to us from the ER at a VA hospital quite frequently. Not all the time, but frequently, right? Whereas they've had an overdose or some major incident, they got hurt, something really bad happened. We've had a lot of guys that come to us who are chronically homeless, right? Yeah. But on the other end of the spectrum, I had one guy, his name was Paul, and this guy was a stud by any measure. Okay, so this guy was All-American linebacker at Stanford, right? Then joins the Marine Corps, was a Marine helicopter pilot, flew Cobras, Marine Corps attack helicopters, right? Flew in Desert Storm, back in 91, and then gets out of the Marines, stays in the reserves, goes to Stanford Law School, right? Finishes law school, was an assistant district attorney up in Northern California, crushing it. The guy's like tall, handsome, jacked. I mean, just stud, right? This guy's crushing it. And then he went back as the reserves got mobilized during Iraq Round 2 in 2003, 2004. Got into a crash, bad TBI, came back home, and then he was not the same person after that. And when we caught him, I mean, we damn near fished him out of the drain. I mean, he lost his law license. I think some cases got overturned because he's a prosecutor. Some cases got overturned because, it was discovered that he was, drunk in court, right? I mean, bad. Nearly lost his wife. Actually, didn't. He ended up, his wife came back to him. God bless him. And, but I mean, when we found him, he was out in the Murrieta, out in the Inland Empire in the desert. When we fished him out, I mean, he was in the middle of getting evicted from a tiny little house in the desert, and he was just surrounded by empty booze bottles and beer cans, surrounded by that. He looked like he was in his 70s. He was actually in his 50s. It was just like a bag of bones. He's probably 150 pounds by this time. He should be about 200 plus, right? And we got him out of there. He spent 4 months with us. And I mean, he did really, really well. I mean, and next thing you know, I mean, he's helping other people in our cohort. I mean, we started sending him books. He's reading again. He's getting, I mean, just the color you see back in their life. And he did really well. I haven't heard from him about a year, but last I heard he was doing pretty well. He was back with his wife, which is surprising. I mean, good for him. Good for her.
Yeah.
I mean, bless her. Because she had every reason just to,
So that's, what's peculiar about the space and the success is that, I know for myself, and I was most certainly that person. I was circling the drain, and I would be begging for somebody like yourself and what you do. I would be like, look, don't put me on the street again. I'm leaving the hospital, right? I'm leaving the hospital. Look, I'll be back in 2 weeks.
Right.
I stand zero chance. If you let me just walk out there and I don't have anybody call, there's no resource. I am just going to be right back. Yeah. And then one day I will eventually just not come back.
Right. Exactly.
Be the end of it. And so it's the success, though. What I'd like to touch on is that sometimes when these people vanish, you haven't spoken to that gentleman, right? And you helped him. So you'd like to believe that he has made it, right? And you have every good reason to believe that he has.
We keep
he has the support of his wife.
Yeah.
But it's so weird because I wonder, how do you measure the success? Because I would count that as a win, but you don't truly know. It's so hard to really quantify.
It really is. It is very hard. So, what we do, I mean, obviously we keep track and keep tabs on. We've got a system for it. Sounds weird, but it's almost like a CRM that we maintain, right?
Yeah.
Of graduates, where it's we follow up. I think I can't remember the exact metric the team has, but it's we follow up every week for the first 3-4 weeks, and it's every month for a couple months, and it's about once a quarter. Everything's going well, and I mean, also keep tabs on them too, because and you probably know this as well as anybody, is that a lot of folks when they relapse, right, they need to come back. It's a part of a process. Not everybody is a one and done. Right, where they go to treatment once and they spend a month or two in treatment, I'm good, and then leave and everything's great. Not usually, right?
Right.
And
usually puts a few runs at it. Yeah.
And we do that to keep, and we do that to keep tabs on guys and just to make sure they're doing well. But also, we can tell. I mean, our guys are trained in this. They can tell when if they're either slow to answer, they don't answer, or if they say, "Yeah, it's okay." I'm like, "Oh, you want to talk about that?" Right? Yeah, you can kind of tell, but it is hard to quantify and then the worst thing also is when they don't pick up the phone, right? They have our information, they don't pick up the phone, they don't answer a text, we don't hear from them, we'll reach out to them, and sometimes we don't hear back. But it is, you're right, it is pretty tough to quantify, right? It is, depending on their age, where they were to begin with, it's tough.
I have this, I don't know where I picked it up or where I had read it, but it really connected with me. Correct me if I'm wrong. I imagine that you would agree with me, though. A lot of times, especially with veterans and a guy like yourself, well, you were mentioning that you wanted that edge. You want a hint of that hood rat shit, right? And so when you have a soldier, you have a person who's gone and experienced that call to adventure.
Yeah.
And they have a support system and the guardrails, and then they're almost, failure is just not an option. Why? Because you have the support of leadership and a brotherhood, and you have, camaraderie, and you have all these things to enable you to succeed in that adventure. So it's like, it's a perfect storm for all of these beautiful and good things.
Yes.
And then I find what I've noticed is that sometimes when that call of adventure starts to dissipate, or it's not around, or you come home and all of a sudden it's over, right? Now you're free, as you mentioned, like, oh, now you're in the private sector. And so there's all these elements that are missing. But I think most importantly, it's that call to adventure. When that's gone, you get a case of the fuckets. It's like, why not? Why not drink this bottle of booze? Nobody's counting on me. There's nobody to save. And maybe even your father, when he's going over there and he's doing these noble runs and these noble causes, and he's helping all these people, and he gets back home and he's looking around and he's like, why not get high? Why the hell not? Fuck it, I'll just do it.
And those guardrails, I think, are really important, which is interesting even for a lot of veterans who end up, who turn out fine, right? By our standard, like, they're doing fine. Usually where they gravitate towards, especially a lot of my friends who recently retired, because it also makes me feel old. A lot of my friends are now retired that are younger than me. And, guys either retired, especially, I'm talking about most of my friends were officers. I have several enlisted guys who are friends, but most of them were officers. And when they get out, it's like, well, what do they stick to? The same structure. They go work for a defense contractor, right? They're still in the military. Or they'll go to an MBA program, right? To kind of like learn all the ropes. And it's like, oh, I go through this and I complete these courses, I make this network, and then they're going to help me find a job. And they go work for a big company, right? Where it's like, it's still much more structured, it's much more established, and it's not as many guys that go out and start their own thing, right? Start their own company. And that was very scary for me. And it was just like, there's a lot of timing, fate, luck, and chance, where, I hate to say it, it was like, I just completed a divorce, right? Where it was like, okay, like, and my daughter was with my ex-wife and she'd been remarried. And so like, okay, so she's taken care of, right? But like, I'm more or less single. I still see my daughter all the time, but still it's like, I'm more or less single. I'm like, this is the chance where I actually have to do something and actually take a real risk. And then, it's almost like an internet phrase they throw around these days, but it's very true. You can just do things, right? And people just say, you can just do things. And that was one thing that just opened my mind. Like, the sky's the limit, but also there's nobody there are, outside of like the law, there aren't any real guardrails. You know what I mean? Like, and so you can go and start something really great. Now, whether or not you succeed, because in terms of, there's hardly any ceiling, sky's the limit, but there's also no floor. And so one thing that's interesting that I've noticed, I've talked about this with a lot of folks, is that a lot of the guys I worked with are what you would very much consider to be very brave, right? They have what we call courage, 100%, especially like physical courage. A lot of the things that we did were just inherently dangerous. Walking down on bombs, jumping out of planes in the middle of the night, doing crazy stuff, right? Is very dangerous. And I've got a few friends that have been hurt, and guys who left pieces of themselves overseas, and some guys who never came back. But with a lot of those guys, if I were to tell those same real tough guys, it's like, hey, dude, what if you had to start a company, and you got to start this, and if your company doesn't succeed, you're going to go bankrupt, and you're going to be in your 30s or your 40s, and you're going to go bankrupt. And you tell some of these guys who, don't have a problem getting into a close quarters gunfight in a room, right, at night, right? They don't think about that so much, but they're like, whoa, I got a wife, 3 kids, and a mortgage. I can't risk that. No fucking way. That scares them more than anything, which is why most veterans, and this isn't a bad thing, this isn't a critique, but they just often gravitate towards working at a big corporation, and they're going to do well. A lot of them will work at a big corporation, but starting your own thing where it's like, this could go in any direction. There's a lot of ways to fail, not a lot of ways to succeed. And that, what I thought was, and honestly, starting a business was the most emotionally taxing thing that I've ever done, more so than anything I ever did in the military. It's longer, a couple times starting a company, I just dread payroll. Do we have enough money to make payroll? Do we have enough money to make payroll? Constantly. That was a constant concern. And it was like there are a few times we're coming up short. We had to beg, borrow, from friends, fools, and family to make it work. Everyone gets paid back eventually. But it was like, we almost went bankrupt like 4 separate times. And that was really scary. And it's like, it's especially now, like going bankrupt in your 40s. And now I'm married. I've got a daughter who's going to be born here in a few weeks. So it's but now it's like we're a little more established. We've had some really good years. We've had some down years, but like we're okay right now. Yeah. But and we're hoping to keep growing and being able to help more guys and gals. But like to me, it's like there's no real like anchor, right, where you can just turn back and rely on. Something.
That's also that call to adventure, though, brother.
Yeah, it is.
What I mean? Like that'll wake you up in the morning. Maybe a little bit out of like fear, but it also motivated at times. And so there's a gift and a curse there. And I don't know. I know for myself that if I don't have much of a purpose, like all of the serious dangers of relapse and addiction, all that stuff starts becoming a real freaking it starts becoming like a possibility if I'm not hyper focused on moving forward. And you had mentioned that earlier, that we're always moving towards something.
Yes.
So having that focus is important, man. And you are clearly focused. And so, well, what else do you got coming? What else do you got developing, or what is in the
work? So one of the things that we have to spend a lot of time working on right now is dealing with, because we're a VA contractor, right, is we have to deal with the VA. Now, a lot of folks might not know this, but the VA is the second largest agency in the federal government, next to the military, right? It's got 480,000 employees. It has a $240 billion budget, right? Which is insane. But then when you think about all the things the VA should be doing, you think about what are the most important when it comes to healthcare for veterans, right? Because most veterans who are in the VA healthcare system are there because if they're much older and just kind of what they're used to, especially like the Vietnam generation, that just kind of, in the Desert Storm generation, that's kind of just what they're used to. But a lot of the younger folks today is usually because either young and healthy and they don't want to pay for healthcare, or they can't afford healthcare, right? And it's there for free. But then you think about what are the biggest challenges the VA has to deal with is right off the bat, immediately, it's mental health, suicide, addiction, right? And the thing is, though, the VA, despite all this money and all these people, they still struggle to do it. So that is why in 2018, the Mission Act was signed into law by President Trump during his first term. And what that did is that created the Community Care Network, of which I'm a part. And so what that does is that gives veterans the option across all healthcare, but really we're focused right now on mental health, substance use disorder, is that creates options where if a veteran's in trouble, they would have the choice where, hey, if there's either no room in a VA facility or they can't see him for a while or it's not a fit, that veteran has a choice to go to a community care provider like us. Well, the thing is that this is politics, right? And the government doesn't like sending their money outside of the government because they look at community care providers like me, and there's hundreds of community care providers, maybe there's over 1,000. Right, that they look at us as like a threat to them, right? And so because it's the analogy is very much one between like a public school district that's struggling, bloated, still can't teach, despite all the money gets thrown out, like the amount of dollars per child that's spent, but the kids aren't learning, the kids aren't doing well, right? But then the community care network, that's like the charter schools, right? That arguably, depending who you talk to, might do a better job, but they do it for a lot less money. It costs the VA a lot less money to pay us than it does for them to do it in-house. Well, what does that school district think of those charter schools? It's a threat. What does the teachers union think of those charter schools? Same situation here. You got the VA employees union, right? They look at us as a threat. We're privatizing VA healthcare. They're trying to privatize the VA, which whether or not you think that's a good thing or not, we're not privatizing it. I can't compete with the largest socialized healthcare network in the world, right? I can't compete with it. So, I'm not trying to compete with it. But they still look as a threat. So because of that, I spent a ton of time. I become my own lobbyist. So my last duty station, like I said, was Washington, D.C. I lived in Capitol Hill. A lot of my friends were staffers on the Hill, worked in the admin. And today, a lot of my friends are back in D.C. They work on the Hill. They work in the White House. A couple of years ago, I testified before the House Veterans Affairs Committee on, which is kind of cool, testifying before Congress, pretty neat, fun experience, but to talking about this exact issue. And the thing is because according to the Mission Act, veterans are supposed to have choice. But if you go back to like your high school civics class or like Schoolhouse Rock, when they say, okay, this bill, how does a bill become a law? I'm just a bill, a lonely bill, right? And finally pass it through Congress, signed by the president. Well, when they don't talk about what happens after that, it gets signed into law by the president, and then it goes to the relevant agencies, in this case, the VA. Well, the VA has a battalion of lawyers, and they look at it, and they look, here's what the law says. Now we have to create policy to enact the law, right? Well, unfortunately, there's an awful lot of artistic license that happens when they take that law and interpret it into policy. So what they decided to say, and we still haven't seen a single legal justification for it, that the access to care standards for substance use disorder and mental health are actually different from everything else, which doesn't say that anywhere in the law, but that's what they've chosen to believe. So now we've been trying to get the current VA Secretary, Doug Collins, to start actually, hey, you need to actually follow the Mission Act as written. That's been slow to come by. I've got friends who work in the White House who oversee VA, right? White House oversees the agencies, right? And I talk to one guy all the time, just talked to him yesterday, who is essentially the White House's representative to VA to conduct oversight of VA. And this has been a continuing problem. But the VA is a giant bureaucracy. It's like turning the Titanic around. And there are a lot of career bureaucrats within the VA who don't want to change, right? Despite the law, they'll smile and nod. But what actually happens, the boots on the ground level, is not what they're saying is happening in Washington, D.C. So that's a lot of what we're doing right now. And matter of fact, there's actually a bill that is in Congress right now that's probably going to pass soon. It's supposed to be passed and signed into law by the president. The goal is to have that happen by Veterans Day, so November 11th.
Okay.
That will really, it like makes these access standards very specific. So it says, no, VA. I mean, really, it's just really saying follow the actual original law, but this will actually codify it.
Got it.
To actually give actual choice to a veteran. Because here's the thing, man. Is there some veterans who might come into an emergency department or call their provider and say, hey, they raise their hand, which is a big step for anybody, especially a big step for a veteran, right? Because we're trained to like, no, I'm good. Oh, I think your leg's broken. No, I'm good, right? I mean, we're trained to say, I'm fine. That's been changing lately, but it's still there. And so when they say they need help, they say, well, we can get you an assessment sometime next week. We'll do an assessment. We'll see where you should go. And then right now there's a waiting list to get you inside for about 27 to 30 days. So what does that veteran actually, when they're in real crisis, what they're really hearing is, we can't help you, right? Especially when you're in real crisis. Because you probably know this as well, and a lot of your audience knows as well. When somebody raises their hand and say, hey, I need help right now, they need to, and they need to go to treatment, let's go. Get in the car. Get on the plane. Here we go, right? And so the thing is like when the VA is telling these veterans they'd have to wait 30 days, right? They don't have 30 hours, right? Yeah. And so what's also crazy to this, and this is one thing we've had to point out, is that let's say a non-veteran, let's say anybody out there off the street who's in an addiction crisis, mental health crisis, and they've got just a simple bare bones insurance policy, right? Like basically meets the Obamacare requirements, like I've got health insurance, right? It doesn't even have to be good policy, right? But let's say it's a Blue Shield, whatever, right? You got your little Blue Shield policy. You don't even need to call them. You could walk into a treatment. You could knock on a door to a treatment center that's in network with that provider or with that carrier and say, hi, I need help. They'll say, okay, good. They'll diagnose you. Okay, yes, you meet the diagnosis for, SUD and you need inpatient. They validate your insurance, verify your benefits, like, yes, you're covered. Welcome. There's a bed available right then and there. Now then my question then is, I'd say, why does a veteran have to wait 30 days when somebody, was supposed to be like the best health care in the country, they love to say, why does a veteran have to wait up to 30 days when a normal person with just a bare bone policy, yeah, granted there might be deductibles and copays involved, but they're going to get treated. They're good right away. And what we say in the military, get them off the X, get them out of the gunfight, get them off the X. And the VA doesn't do that. And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it because they don't really care about veterans. They do it because they care more about their own organization. Because at the end of the day, I hate to say it, I'll say it. The VA's number one priority is the VA as an organization.
Right.
Unfortunately.
And so you're out there and you've got a big day coming up, before, well, it's not on Veterans Day. You're saying before Veterans Day.
We're hoping for a signature ceremony at the White House on Veterans Day. That's
Okay.
the goal. Yeah.
All right.
That's the sign of the White House. I'm going to hope to be there. Yeah. I mean, it's like, that's what we're
awesome.
looking to do. Yeah.
Well, Tom, listen, brother, you are no doubtedly, like, this is amazing what you're doing and going up against a Goliath, right? Like, 'cause just for saying, hey, look, like, but I think that your observations are accurate. It's just grown. That's what entities do. They grow and they start to kind of become autonomous, like structures and beings. And then they're just kind of living on their own, and they're motivated by perpetuating their own system. And so that's what's happened. And it's just what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so here it has happened, but there are people suffering, and I truly appreciate the fact that you're out there. And you've got the people that need help. You got them by the hand, and you're like, look, we're going to go up against Goliath, and we're going to make things different for you guys. We're going to do it, boots to ground, right?
Yeah.
And you're making a real change, brother. And that is, it takes balls. It takes, like you said, a lot of courage, and a lot of dedication. And I can see that.
I appreciate that.
But this is now, just share with everybody, let everybody know, like, what's going on as far as resources. Where can they reach out to you? How can they?
I say, so if somebody's listening to this, either themselves or loved ones, a veteran who's in trouble, they can look us up. We're Miramar, so miramarhealth.com. So MIRAMAR health.com. That's our resources, and then they'll find a link. But in order to come to us for a VA referral, right, you have to go through your VA provider. And so we are contracted, we're in California, but we're contracted with every VA medical facility in the Western United States. So Pacific time zone, Mountain time zone, plus Texas, Hawaii, Alaska. We're contracted with all those. Yeah, that's our big focus right now. So, but you can look us up, miramarhealth.com. That's where we are. But if they also need help to go through their VA provider, and they ask about, it's called community care. That's what we are, community care provider. And that's our main resource. And other than that, I mean, I am on X. My drug of choice is Twitter, X. So I'm a prolific poster, but mostly not related to this. Mostly just my own right-wing rantings. That's about it. Oh yeah. So I've been because of this. It's interesting because I started doing some of this lobbying stuff. I became friends with people in the government, and so I've helped out on some campaigns. And I've got a few friends who are members of Congress. I got a few friends in the admin, and so I'm fairly prolific on there. But that's a little separate from the business. I keep them a little separate, sort of. But people figure it out. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, listen, man, I truly appreciate your time, and I appreciate your mission, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you so much. It's been another episode of The Next Fix, y'all.